you post regularly, and it's a big deal for your businesses. Is that fair to say?
It really is. I did a test model, and it was, I'm done with social media. I need some a mental health month or whatever,
break.
and I just put it aside, and I watched my business drop dramatically over that week, and I was like, well, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I have to be back on, and I manage all of my social media accounts. It's hard to kind of like act like I'm not the one managing it, right? But at the same time, people really want to feel connected to somebody.
Yeah.
So I try to make it very personal. But it's difficult. If I don't post at 7 p.m. the day before about tomorrow, and I don't post at 7 a.m. today about today, my business is really affected almost 40%.
That's a huge deal. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ben and Sway Show. I'm Russ Vaughan with Ben and Sway, and I'm here with Chad White. Many of you may know from Top Chef. Was it season 13?
Yes.
Yeah, season 13 at Top Chef. But rather than me explain who he is, I'll let Chad introduce himself. So why don't we talk a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, and then we'll get into all the things you're involved with.
Yeah, so Chad White, born and raised here in Spokane. Grew up in the Valley, go Bears. And I spent a lot of my childhood and teenage years on a dairy farm during my summers.
Cool.
In Addy, Washington, which I think probably is an attribute to why I'm probably as driven as I am, or I have the work ethic that I have, or the tenacity. It was a great environment to grow up in, but instead of hanging out with Jimmy, John, and Joe during the summer, riding bikes and doing sweet tricks, I was milking cows and shoveling manure, bucking bales.
Hey, so I think that makes us who we are.
Yeah. I joined the Navy on 9/11. I was stationed in San Diego. Oddly enough, I was a cook. It was the only thing that I qualified for. I was not a strong academic force. I think it was because I had distractions, be it girls or whatever it was, So I joined the Navy and somehow found this really cool bridge between art and food, and I really enjoyed the arts growing up. My grandmother was a painter. I did a lot of kiln work, and we always had these like crazy nativity scenes all around her house made out of ceramics that were hand painted by her, and snow globes and all these things. And so I spent a lot of time also with her kind of painting and drawing, and I was nowhere near the kind of artist that she was, but it was a fuel for where I'm at today. And kind of went up through their ranks and worked in some great restaurants for some incredible chefs after I had left the military, and didn't open but became a partner in a restaurant in 2010. Was my first restaurant ownership, and that restaurant helped me catapult my career into many different directions, from national television to owning more restaurants, international restaurants. Opening a restaurant in Tijuana, Mexico, and in San Diego, and then finally deciding to move back home and kind of build in the community that I grew up in.
So that first restaurant partnership, was that in San Diego as well?
It was, yeah.
Okay, cool. So you learned how to cook in the Navy. Did you do any other training besides that before you got into cooking, or was it just on-the-job training and let's put it to work?
Well, so the Navy, the reason why I chose to be a cook, because I did have some sort of an option, right? You take an ASVAB score, and based on your score, you are placed in a career, right? And if you score really high, let's say you're smart enough to be a nuclear engineer, then you probably have every opportunity there is in the Navy, right?
Right.
Like that's the cream of the crop. So now if you want to be a gunner's mate, you could be that, or you could make a lot of money and be a nuclear engineer. For me, the only trade school position that I qualified for was to be a cook. Everything below that was seaman, fireman, airman, which basically you're an undesignated individual. Your job is to pick up fob, foreign objects on a flight deck so those don't get sucked up into jets. Sweep the flight deck or mop peeways or paint and chip paint on the side of the ship until you get to this period after 2 years where you can apply to take a test, and then if you pass that test for that specific job, then you could go on and have a career and go to a trade school. So I opted in for being a cook.
So when you got that back and you said, "Oh, you could be a cook,"
Yeah.
was that something that like hit you like, yes, or did you have that affinity for cooking yet?
No. I mean, I cooked growing up with my grandmother. She was a phenomenal cook, but I really didn't have this idea of, oh, I'm going to go and be a chef and this is going to be great. When I heard that, I was like, okay. And I was also upset, just like everybody is. You're watching these towers fall, there's people dying, there's this emotion attached to it. My first thought was, I'm going to go kill some people, right? And then I got to the place and the line for the Marines was really long, and I was like, if I sit in this line long enough, I'll talk myself out of it. So the shortest line was Navy, and I took that opportunity. And so the ASVAB, got me the cook position. But where it kind of like I was a bit excited about it was, I was working at the Doubletree Hotel, which is now Marabou.
Here in Spokane.
Here in Spokane.
Yeah.
And the GM at that time of that hotel was kind of a cool guy, cool car, hot girlfriend. I was like, yeah.
That could work.
That could be cool, right? And they provide training for that in their trade schools. But in all reality, it's like 80% cooking and 20% barracks management. However, my recruiter made it sound like, oh, you'll be a hotel manager. And then I was like, yeah, that's cool. Let's do that. So yeah, I had zero real interest in being a cook.
Well, it's kind of cool though, because you talk about your upbringing, the art portion of it, cooking with your grandmother. It sounds like that was a big influence on a lot of stuff. And then a set of circumstances provide itself in front of you that you end up being a cook for the Navy, and that's pretty serendipitous, it sounds like, because that led you down this career path that's, we can talk a little bit more about each step of that way, but that's really where you found your way.
Well, and depending on how far you want to go down the rabbit hole, I guess spending time on a dairy farm when I was a child
where it
provides
comes
a
from.
much bigger connection, I guess, with our food system and now being a chef. And that was just my moment now where the light bulb came on. I'd never thought of that before, but thank you.
You're welcome. No, I think all that stuff, we have one path, right? Whether we choose correctly or not, that's the path. And I think one of the things that you shared with me about your struggle with school and attention, immediately that goes to some of the best entrepreneurs in this day and age. And we are in the age of entrepreneurism, and it's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's not for everybody, but one of the things that I hear a lot about are kids that had ADD or ADHD or never were diagnosed but thought they were dyslexic. I always thought I was dyslexic. I think I am. And in certain circumstances, people really don't like the fact that our attention will get pulled some other direction. But there's something else cool about that line of thinking, and that is that you can really focus also, which seems counterintuitive. But when you describe that, it's like the lights going off, ding, 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 he's an entrepreneur. And everything you've done really shines a light on that. And I don't know how that all plays together, but I think it's because we have this very wide purview of everything that's going on. That's why it catches our attention. So we see details, we see things that other people, as they're just plodding along, don't see. And there has to be a spot for everybody in our society and communities. It's just great when you can see people that have a creative gift, whether it be art or, in your case, food, and they're able to put that together with a real good entrepreneurial spirit and make something awesome that adds a lot of value to a lot of people. And I think that's some of the stuff that you've been doing. So why don't we talk a little bit about your time, how you got to be on Top Chef, and then some of the restaurants you're involved with, and what do you got coming down the pipe?
Yeah, so Top Chef was a interesting period of time for me. Pre-show, the first restaurant that I had been a partner in was called Sea Rocket Bistro. And this restaurant was unique in the fashion that we were trying to be this local seafood restaurant where we sourced all of our ingredients locally. We only used local fishermen, and then some stuff we used a local fishing distribution company that worked with local fishermen, like a San Diego Fishermen's Working Group, and developed those relationships with them. But where we found our success, and which got me some notoriety, was that we were working with a fishmonger that was saying, hey, I have all these swordfish spines that have meat still on them, but we're just throwing them in the trash can. Do you think that you could do something with this, right? And then it was, well, send me a spine and we'll check it out. And for me, as a business owner, you go, well, sweet, I'm gonna get the spine for free, and then I'm probably gonna do something with it that's gonna turn into a profit, right? And so, we would do that, and it was, we'll cook the whole spine, marinated in persilade, and throw it on the grill, and then we'll scrape the meat off of the spine, and then we'll serve that in a special. And then it's diving into that spine even further, and then you see it's got these knuckles, and then you're cutting into that knuckle, and you look inside, and there's this jelly, right, which is like the bone marrow of a swordfish, which at the time I didn't even know existed. I was like, well, bone marrow is only on animals, land animals, not seafood. And so then I'm scooping that out and serving it on a salt rock with lime, and having it be like a little shooter. And that became a dish. Or taking all of this broken sea urchin and then turning it into 9 different styles of dish, including ice cream, which some people are going, that sounds disgusting, and there's other people who are really interested in food and they like being challenged, and they try that and they go, wow, I love sea urchin, this is a great experience with this product that I never thought I would have. Or there's liver. How do we do fish liver? We've been doing chicken liver mousse for hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of years. How can we do that with seafood? Maybe it's not going to be a mousse, but maybe it's going to be, treat it like foie gras and pan-sear it. So I got recognized in that restaurant for taking these things and turning them into delicious, turning trash into cash.
It's
right?
Cool. Yeah.
And it wasn't that the food was gross, it was just, we have to find a way to utilize this. That got me put on Bizarre Foods on the Travel Channel with Andrew Zimmern.
Okay.
And of course, then that opened up doors, and then I became a partner in another restaurant called Gabardine with Brian Malarkey, who was on Top Chef. Okay. And kind of how the Top Chef thing works is they take a portion of their previous chefs who are on the show, and they go, who are people you know in your community or around the United States that would be a good fit for the show? I don't know if that was specifically it, because that was asked of me after I was on the show, but I have a feeling that Brian probably, I was a referral of his. Yeah. And then they came after me. And I'll be honest, when I first got the phone call and email and all that stuff, I put up the biggest roadblock, because at that time I was the chef and owner of 4 restaurants. And I was concerned that if I went onto the show and I failed, that it would be a domino effect in the wrong direction for my businesses, and they could potentially close, right? That was a risk that I was concerned that would be negative for me. And it wasn't until I had a restaurant that was heading south faster than I could recognize it heading south that my publicist said, hey bro, now's the time to go on the show. If you want to resurrect this concept, you're going to have to do something about it, and whatever you're doing isn't working, so maybe this show could be it, right? Yeah. And for a lot of people who have been on Top Chef, I'd say probably close to 40% have been able to go out, open a restaurant afterwards, and find wealth and success, whatever, however you want to measure that. So I said, heck, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I think it worked out all right.
You know what's funny is you talk about basically repurposing these different parts of the fish. And it strikes me as it's very entrepreneurial to do that. And one of the stories I was thinking about as you're saying it was actually Standard Oil and Rockefeller. We mentioned that earlier. Like, do you know the story of how he created gasoline as a product?
I don't.
So at that time, we didn't have electricity everywhere. So the way that we lit the streets of New York City was with kerosene. And so he got into the kerosene business, and that was what most of the oil was doing. And they had this very unstable byproduct that they poured just out to the ground. And if it caught fire, it was a disaster. Well, that was gasoline.
Yeah.
And that's, I can't remember how it went from there, but basically they figured out, okay, what do we do with this highly combustible, disastrous stuff? Because it was a real problem. And it turned out to be the core of what they're doing, and it was a garbage item, basically.
Yeah.
And it's that's some of the ways that we're trying to do forest management, too, is how do we take these challenges of mass wildfire and get these forests into a healthy condition and reuse those products in ways that are really sustainable for people.
Yeah.
And from a sustainability standpoint, what you're doing is super cool too, because you created dishes out of fish that were already caught and used.
Yeah.
In different ways. And that's a cool story. So talk a little bit about how that's brought you to where you are today. You're back in Spokane now. Talk a little bit about what you've got going on here.
Yeah, so I, moving back to Spokane was a kind of a more dark moment for me, right? It was, I found success, I did really well, I closed this restaurant, I fell into a force field of depression that I felt like I couldn't climb out of this box. I was afraid that possibly San Diego was done with me. Right? Even though I still had things that were working, that are still working to this day, I just didn't feel like it was a sustainable place for me to live anymore. I needed mental health.
Yeah.
I needed to be around my family, and all these different things. And so moving back was really a dark time for me. I had to move in with my sister. I was sued by the people who we were buying products from. All of our COGS I had signed personal guarantees on, even though the restaurant that I was attached to, and the reason why I got sued, I was just a sweat equity shareholder. I had no skin in the game whatsoever besides the time and effort that I had put into it, but I had signed personal guarantees. So you have an individual who doesn't have a ton of net worth signing guarantees that he can't guarantee.
Yeah.
Right? So when the business closed, I was on the hook for those specific things. Not that I was the only person that came out scarred. My business partners, who were multimillionaires, they had to pay their fair share of things that they had guaranteed on. But for me, it was a big blow. And it was, gosh, I think it was a place I just didn't know I could climb out of.
Yeah.
And so moving in with my little sister into her home, living rent-free for 6 months, while I walked around every city corner in Spokane trying to find the place where I could open a restaurant on, pennies, was really kind of a difficult thing. But I found where I was going to put Zona Blanca in. And luckily I had an opportunity with a developer who's just right on the other side of this wall, Chris Batten from Rencorp. We sat down and he talked to me and he said that he saw something, and I have this location. I think that we can get it done for what you need, and let's get you open really quick. And it was kind of like a 4-week decision, and then I was off to the running, and we opened up Zona Blanca, and Zona Blanca paid all of my debts, which was remarkable, right? So we, in the entrepreneurial world, we talk about peaks and valleys, right? The risk is often great, and the reward can be okay, and sometimes the reward can be awesome, but you have to take that risk and you have to believe in yourself. And opening a ceviche restaurant in Spokane may not have been the easiest path, right? Because it doesn't exist. I mean, ceviche had existed in some restaurants, but very minimal. And if you didn't know what ceviche was as an American in a Mexican restaurant, you probably are not going to order it.
Right.
And ceviche was really generated off of taking fish from a catch back in Peru when Spain was running around the world taking over things. Of being able a way to preserve that fish to be able to eat it longer, right? So kind of that same thing of turning trash into cash. And so we opened this restaurant, or I didn't really have any partners in that, but Chris helped me get the thing open, and it worked really, really good. And in a part of town that's not exactly the easiest part of town. So it was very exciting for that to happen, and then that opened up opportunities with opening Tide Lobster Bar, which has been a huge success, and I just thank Spokane for the support that they've been giving me. For me to come home and them cradle me, and this might be the first time they've ever heard me talk about like how dark of a place I was really in. And then that created an opportunity for me to then look at projects down the roads. And we most recently 3 months ago opened up TT's Old Iron Brewery and Barbecue, and TT's and how it's connected is really an interesting story because Travis Tosath is my business partner. He founded TT's Old Iron Brewery. He had been working at Frito-Lay for 25 plus years, created beer in his home as a home brewer, and was always talking to his teammates at his position and saying, I want to do this someday. And then he met Chris Batten, who also owned the building where Zona Blanca is, and he went into the incubator system, right? And so that brewery model was really so people that were home brewers could come in, get a taste for the real brewing world, get their product out into the community, and then once they build a foundation or relationship with the community, then they could go off and open up their own restaurants. So the whole model is based off of come in, build a product, test the market, and then go off and do your own thing. And he is the first brewery to expand that way.
That's cool.
And in the process of that, he said, I know about beer. I know nothing about running a restaurant or anything about the food part of the world. And he reached out to me and asked me for advice. And then after many talks down the road, we decided to just go 50-50 on it. And instead of just getting a little tiny space, we went huge in the valley and found a 6,000 square foot warehouse and built a monster.
And as you said earlier, that it's going great.
It's incredible. I don't think that I would have ever imagined it being where it's at right now. There are most days we're doing between 900 and 1,200 people a day.
That's awesome.
And that's just incredible. And to have, once again, that support to come out. The Valley doesn't have a lot of food places to go. But they could choose to go somewhere else. It doesn't take a lot of effort to drive 3 miles in a car. Right? So for them to come out and support us has just been the biggest reward.
Yeah, that's cool. And so you have 3 locations in the Spokane area. I've been to the lobster. Is it Lobster Tide? Is that what? Tide Lobster. Yeah. It's great. I mean,
Thank you.
It's really cool. And if people don't know, it's actually in the skywalk right in between the Cutter Building and then U.S. Bank, right? Numerica. Yeah. Okay, that's
so
right.
it's Cutter Tower, Numerica Building, and then U.S. Bank is across the.
Once you get in the skywalks, it's hard to figure out where you are.
Oh man, it is.
It's like its own little place, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
its own ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah. But it's the bread you use, the way that it's toasted and everything goes together. I've had the surf and turf a couple of times, and it's a really refreshing difference of food, and it's quick, and you can get in there, and if you're downtown, get in there, get great food, get out, doing what you're doing. It's pretty awesome.
It's cool. And we didn't really reinvent the wheel. We just found something that was working in other places and said, this is missing in Spokane. Do people want this? So I did some test models at Zona Blanca, and we were selling out of lobster incredibly quick, and we're like, oh, well, this could be something.
Yeah.
And it's been great. And so now we're opening a second location in the Wonder Building, which is the old Wonder Bread factory, right across the alleyway from David's Pizza and across the street from, in one direction, the Spokane Arena, and the other direction, the Flour Mill.
Right, so just on the other side of the river. Actually had to drive by there because of the Monroe Street Bridge was closed.
Oh, yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about. No, that's cool. That's cool. So you'll have 4 locations, 2 the High Tide, and then the Zona Blanca, and then the barbecue place out in the valley. It's TT's Barbecue.
TT's Brewery and Barbecue. So we
and
brew our own beer, and we make all of our own barbecue. And it's incredible. I mean, I put a post up this morning. 2 years ago, I would have never imagined to be an owner of a brewery, let alone a barbecue joint.
Let's wrap this up here. We could talk about a lot of things.
Yeah.
But another thing that we talk about here, and we'll just finish with this, is social media. You just talked about posts. You post regularly, and it's a big deal for your businesses. Is that fair to say?
It really is. You know, I did a test model, and it was, I'm done with social media. I need some mental health month or whatever,
break.
and I just put it aside, and I watched my business drop dramatically over that week, and I was like, well, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I have to be back on, and I manage all of my social media accounts. It's hard to kind of like act like I'm not the one managing it, right? But at the same time, people really want to feel connected to somebody.
Yeah.
So I try to make it very personal. But it's difficult. If I don't post at 7 p.m. the day before about tomorrow, and I don't post at 7 a.m. today about today, my business is really affected almost 40%.
That's a huge deal.
And so, you know, getting people engaged
Great
is
way
the
to
key.
Connect, because it becomes community, your audience, and then it reminds them, you know, I haven't been there in a week, I better stop by. If you leave it alone, they're not going to show up.
Yeah, and it inspires you too, right? Like in the service industry, you post something that people love and that they've had, and then they comment on it and say, oh man, that's so good. I mean, who doesn't like compliments? The minute I'm getting a compliment about that, I'm now fueled to do something cool and fun tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. Well, Chad, thanks for being on the show. It's been a lot of fun talking to you about what's going on in your life, and thanks for sharing the other stuff that we all have challenges, and we go through them, and sometimes we forget to share them, and maybe there's somebody out there going through that dark place that knows that you went through it, and you're an inspiration to them. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being a part of Spokane. So welcome back.
Thanks for having me.